Let's talk about the most ridiculous amount of money you can use to get rich, $100 a month. Imagine two guys, both are 24, both making $42,000 a year at jobs they kind of hate. They live in the same apartment complex in an average American city. They have the same student loans, the same Sunday night dread, the same dating apps, and the same gym membership they never use. On paper, they are identical. Fast forward 40 years. One of them is fully retired at 62, sitting on a porch he paid cash for, looking at a brokerage account with $632,000 in it. The other one is 64, still working, staring at his laptop on a Tuesday night doing the math on how many more years he has left. Same income their whole lives. No inheritance, no lottery tickets. The only difference between them was $100 a month and a specific turning point around year 9 that I'm going to show you in a minute. My name is Max, and I spend way too much time thinking about why one boring autopay habit at age 24 quietly beats decades of I'll start when I make more money. If you've ever told yourself that, hit subscribe and like. It helps me keep making these. But that year 9 moment, that's the whole game. Pay attention, let's look at the math first because the math makes people uncomfortable. You invest $100 every single month. You don't increase it, you don't get fancy, you don't pick stocks, you just dump it into a basic S&P 500 index fund, the boring one your uncle won't stop talking about at Thanksgiving and you forget it exists. At an 8% annual return, which is actually lower than the stock market's historical average, here is what happens. After 10 years, you have $18,000. And I know exactly what you're thinking right now. $18 grand in a decade? That's it? That's what I'm getting out of bed for? Hold on, stay with me, because this is the exact spot where 90% of people quit. And the next number is where it gets stupid. After 20 years, you have $58,900, you only put in $24,000. The market just handed you $35,000 on top, more than you ever put in yourself. After 30 years, you have $149,000. You put in $36,000. The market gave you the other $113,000. After 40 years, you have $351,000. You only contributed $48,000 total. The market handed you over $300,000 simply because you didn't panic. And if you run that same math at the S&P 500's actual long-term average of about 10%, you end up with $632,000. From $100 a month, you contributed less than the price of a used car, and you ended up with enough to buy a house in cash in most of America. And before you raise the obvious objection, yes, inflation eats some of that. The S&P 500's real, inflation-adjusted return is closer to 7%. At 7% real return, that $100 a month over 40 years still buys you $262,000 in today's purchasing power. Keeping cash under your mattress, by contrast, loses about 70% of its value over 40 years. Not investing isn't safe. Not investing is a guaranteed slow robbery. So here is where I lose half the audience, because if this is true, and it is, the math is just the math. Then a reasonable question is, why isn't everyone doing it? The answer is annoying. People don't do it because $100 feels insulting. It feels like bringing a cheap cooler to a 5-star restaurant. You look at the number and your brain goes, that can't possibly matter. So people wait. They wait until they have more, until they are in a better place, until they get serious. But here's what's actually happening when you wait. There's a behavioral finance concept called insuring. Researchers studied app-based investors a few years ago, and what they found was genuinely funny in a tragic way. The size of your first investment becomes the anchor for every investment after it. If you start with $20, you'll always feel like that's your normal amount. If you start with $2,000, that becomes your baseline. So when people wait to start until they can really invest, what they're actually doing is permanently setting their anchor at 0. Their default contribution becomes nothing, forever. They aren't waiting. They are choosing to do nothing. And let me tell you the part nobody wants to hear. The reason you haven't started isn't that you can't afford it. It's that starting small makes you feel small. You'd rather feel like someone who is about to invest $10 Zerzun than actually be someone who invests $100. Both of those people exist. Only one of them is real. Meanwhile, the people who started with a measly $100 at 24, their anchor is, I invest every month. That's the identity. That's the default. Everything else compounds off of that one decision. Okay, now we're at the part I promised you in the intro. The thing about year 9, there is a specific moment, a specific month, where your investment account stops being a savings account and starts being a money machine. The crossover. Here is how it works. Every year you put in $100 a month. 12 months. That's your contribution. For the first few years, the market gives you scraps. $48 in year 1, maybe $500 by year 5. You are still doing way more work than your money. In year 8, you put in $200 and the market gives you about $1,070. You are still carrying the weight. Then year 9, you put in your $2,200 and the market quietly hands you $1,259. For the first time in your life, your investments earned more in a year than you contributed. Your money is now doing more work than you are. You've crossed over, and nobody throws you a party. Nothing happens. Your app doesn't send you a notification. The stock market doesn't call to say congratulations. You don't even notice it unless you are tracking the numbers like a weirdo. But that month, somewhere around month 104, your entire financial trajectory pivots. Before the crossover, you are a worker funding an account. After the crossover, you are a passenger riding in your own portfolio. And here is the brutal part. Every year after that, the gap gets wider. By year 20, your account is earning 4 or 5 times your annual contribution. By year 30, it's earning 10 times what you put in. The math doesn't just speed up slowly, it explodes. The crossover is why the guy on the porch in our intro is on the porch. He didn't out-earn his friend. He didn't get a better job. He just made it to year 9, and then year 15, and then year 25, while his friend was still waiting for the right time. I want to slow down for a second because I think people skip past this too fast. The version of you that doesn't start, that version is real. That version exists somewhere in your future. And they are doing something specific right now. They are 58 years old, sitting at a kitchen table on a Tuesday night, refreshing a 401k balance. They are doing the math on how many more years they have to work to retire, and the answer is going to be too many. That isn't a hypothetical. That is just what happens when you do the math forward from "I'll start next year" repeated 30 times in a row. And here is a stat that should be illegal to say out loud. The median 401k balance right now is around $38,000. Median, meaning half of all American workers with a 401k have less than that. If you invested $100 a month at 8%, you would beat that $38,000 in just 16 years. A habit that costs less than your phone bill running for the lifespan of a used car beats half of every working American with a retirement account. I'm not saying this to be smug. I'm saying it because most people genuinely believe that the people maxing out their 401ks are pulling away from them at light speed. They aren't. According to recent surveys, nearly 60% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency. Over a quarter have zero emergency savings at all. Your competition is one flat tire away from credit card debt. When you invest $100 a month, you are not playing the same game as the average American. They are playing defense with a stack of overdue bills. You are playing offense with the stock market. That 58-year-old version of you at the kitchen table doesn't have to exist, but they become more real every month you don't start. Okay, deep breath. I'm gonna pull back because the math is the boring part. The actually important thing is what happens to you, not your portfolio, but you. When you start investing $100 a month, you cross a line you cannot uncross. You become an investor, and being an investor is a totally different identity than being a saver, a spender, or someone just vibing through their finances hoping nothing breaks. Here is what shifts. You start reading expense ratios. You start noticing when a fund charges 0.6% versus 0.03%. You start understanding why that matters, because over 30 years, a 1% fee difference will steal about $23,000 from your account. That's a wedding. That's a year of college. Gone to a guy in a suit who did absolutely nothing. Your spending starts to look weird to you because you now have a mental conversion rate. $100 stops being a nice dinner out. It becomes $1,000 in future dollars 30 years from now at 8%. It's a wild way to look at a steak, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And here is a behavioral fact that genuinely changed how I think about money. Research shows that 74% of people think more money would solve their problems, but when they actually get a windfall, like $5, 00, the happiness boost lasts about 6 months. Think about that. Half of every treat yourself purchase you've ever made has a half-life shorter than a gym membership. If happiness has an expiration date, why do we keep spending money on things that won't outlive the receipt? Now, a quick objection people raise: what about market crashes? The market is too volatile right now to invest. Major financial firms have run the numbers on this. Over the last 20 years, the S&P 500 returned about 10.6% annualized. If you missed just the 10 best days, your return dropped to 6 to 4%. Missing the 20 best days drops you to 3.7%. Missing 30 drops you below 2%. Missing 40 puts you in the negative. The catch? The best days almost always cluster within 2 weeks of the worst days. So, every time you sell during a crash, you are statistically the kind of genius who turns off the oven right before the food is done. Time in the market beats timing the market. That's the whole game. I want to introduce you to 3 people because abstract math is one thing, but humans live in specifics. The first is Sarah. She's 22, just graduated, and is working a $42,000 entry-level marketing job. She doesn't have a financial advisor, she doesn't have rich parents. She has a Roth IRA she opened on her phone in 12 minutes, with a $100 automatic contribution that hits the day after payday. Sarah doesn't check her account, by the way. She forgets the password and has to reset it twice a year. That's her entire involvement. She never increases the $100. She never gets fancy. She just buys a total market index fund for 43 years. By 65, she has about $447,000 at an 8% return, or around $823,000 at the long-run average of 10% tax-free. Because it's a Roth. Sarah isn't a genius. She isn't highly disciplined. She is just on auto pay. The second is Mike, 35 years old, single dad, 2 kids, just landed his first real job with benefits. His employer matches 50% of his 401k contribution up to a limit. He puts in $100 a month and the employer kicks in $50. So his effective contribution is $150. Mike set this up on his lunch break in a fast food parking lot. That was the moment. A burger in one hand, his phone in the other. He didn't tell anyone, he didn't celebrate, he just did it. 30 years of that at 8% gets him to about $223,000. His own money, the part he actually paid, was $36,000. The rest is the employer match plus compound growth. He more than doubles the median 55 to 64-year-old's 401k simply by being a late starter who showed up. The match isn't a perk, it's a math weapon. The third is David, 50 years old. He'd been saying, "I'll start next year" since 2002. What finally got him? A comment his brother-in-law made at a barbecue. Something about being the kind of guy who never starts. It wouldn't leave his head. 3 weeks later, David opened a brokerage account. 20 years later, at 70, David has about $58,000 at 8%, or $76,000 at 10%. Is that a full retirement? No. David isn't buying a yacht. But here is the part David doesn't see until he actually looks. He still beats the median 45 to 54-year-old's 401k right now. Even though he started 28 years late on the world's most boring schedule, he is still ahead of half of mid-career America. Late is better than never by a 5-figure margin. Here is where I get serious, because I think this is the part most people miss. $100 a month is not a financial decision. It's an identity decision. You aren't really choosing what to do with $200 a year. You are choosing who you are. You are choosing whether you're the kind of person who participates in the economy as an owner, or the kind of person who only participates as a worker. Owners have their money working for them while they sleep. Workers trade hours for dollars and start the clock over every Monday. 2 completely different lives. There's also a quiet cost most people never count. If you're 31 and you haven't started, you've already left about $40, zero on the table, compared to the version of you who started at 22. That money is gone. We can't get it back. But the version of this conversation where you're 41 and still haven't started, that is the one I'm trying to prevent right now. The wildest thing about the system we live in is that the door to becoming an owner is unlocked. It costs $100. It takes 15 minutes to set up. The brokerage accounts are free. Index funds have fees of less than 0.1%. Fractional shares mean you can buy a piece of every major company in America with what you'd spend on a single bar tab. The door is unlocked, and most people just stand in front of it for 30 years Googling whether the door actually exists, while the people who walked through it at 22 are now sitting on 6-figure portfolios they barely think about. Warren Buffett said compounding is a snowball. The trick, he said, is to have a very long hill, which means starting young or living a very long time. Preferably both. $100 a month is you packing your first snowball. It's small. It's pathetic. It barely rolls. For the first few years, it just kind of sits there. But the hill is 40 years long, and if you give that snowball 40 years on that hill, it doesn't end up as a snowball. It ends up as a glacier. I'm going to wrap this up with a practical thing, because if you've watched this far and you don't do anything, I have failed. Step 1. Open a brokerage account. Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, any of them. It takes 15 minutes. You can do it from your phone in the time it takes to scroll through social media and convince yourself other people's lives are better than yours. Step 2. Inside that account, open a Roth IRA if you're under the income limit. If you have a 401k with a match at work, use that first up to the match. Free money comes first. Quick caveat, if you've got credit card debt at 24% APR, pay that down before doing any of this. No market return on earth beats credit card interest, but still take the 401k match. A 50% instant return beats every debt rate. Step 3, pick one fund. Just one. A total market index fund or an S&P 500 index fund. The ticker symbols don't matter. They're all basically the same boring thing. Step 4. Set up an automatic transfer of $100 a month the day after payday, before you have a chance to think about it. Before your dumb brain says, I'll do it next month. Step 5. Don't check it. Seriously, don't. Once a quarter is fine, once a year is better. Every time you check it, you're going to want to do something, and doing nothing is the entire strategy. The strategy is to be useless. The strategy is to be a sleeping investor for 40 years. That's it. 5 steps, probably 20 minutes total, and then you go back to your life. The same job, the same apartment, the same takeout habit. And in the background, the snowball starts rolling. Now, remember those 2 friends from the start of this video? Same job, same apartment, same student loans, same nothing. The one on the porch at 62 and the one still working at 64. Here is what I didn't tell you. They had the same conversation about this exact video. Both of them watched it. Both of them saw the math. Both of them understood the crossover. Both of them got to the end. But only one of them set up the auto pay. That's the whole game. $100 a month isn't an investment strategy. It's a vote. Every month on auto pay, you're voting on which version of yourself wins. Vote enough times in a row, and the version of you that wins is the version that didn't need permission to start. The right time was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now, during this video. Oh, one last thing, and then I'll let you go. If you watched this entire video and thought, wait, who makes content like this? And how does that even work as a business? That's a question I get a lot. So I built a free community where I show people exactly how to do it. How to research a topic like this one. How to write a script that holds attention for 20 minutes. How to set up a faceless YouTube channel that actually pays you while you sleep. Same compounding logic, different asset. It's free. The link is in the description. If you're not interested, no pressure. The rest of this video stands on its own. But if you've been watching this thinking, I could do this, you probably could. And I'd rather show you how than have you spend 2 years figuring it out alone. Anyway, back to the actual point. I'm not a financial advisor. This is all educational, and your situation depends on your decisions and your actions. But the math is the math, and the math doesn't care whether you believe it. It just keeps running.